Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. Okay, today we are over here. Let's just get started with our week one. Okay, so we are over here mainly to get most out of the new technologies on the HANA side, on the Fiori Elements side. Okay, so daily, okay, what we would be going always through would be the first we would be going through the agenda for the particular session that we would be covering. Then if let's say tomorrow or let's say next Saturday, we would be going with the quick recap of what we learned. So always we would be going with the quick recap, the agenda, and then we would be starting with the agenda for that particular session. So that is how we would be working each and every day. Meantime, if you have any questions, you can anytime unmute yourself. I'll be keeping all of you on mute mode, so you can unmute anytime and you can ask the questions. Of course, you should not wait till the topic ends, so the question would be more relatable at then and then. Yeah, in between, if you have any queries, then I'm always there. Okay, yeah, thank you. And now let's just get started. So, what we would be starting with today is something we can call it as a core data services. Okay, so I'll be first going with the quick agenda for today's session. So what we would be learning today is we would be learning the concept of REST API. Then, of course, to develop something on the CDS side. So just a second, maybe one of our colleague is having some issue in joining. Okay. So we would be getting ourselves comfortable with the ADT, which is ABAP development tool. Okay, so those are the advanced development kits that we would be needing for any sort of development related to the CDS. Then we would be learning what is CDS, what are the types of it, and how we can figure out what all are the important components, or we can say how we can figure out the components of the CDS, different components, where those are available and how we can find those in the system. Then we would be going with the multiple type, let's say parameterized and the non-parameterized CDS. Then we would be trying to consume those, be it in a web program or via the OData service, how we can use those. And what are the session variables, those are available that we can also go through. Now, let's just quickly go and check why this particular, all the components are required and how we have actually formed the agenda. Okay, so let's say we are over here saying we would be learning CDS, but why it is required at the very first place. So if I talk about we are on HANA, and at the same time we are also learning the Fiori Elements. Okay. So when I say I am on HANA, okay, what is my main point of focus over here? It means whenever I am on HANA, what I am trying to gain over here, we can say a better performance. Better performance for application. Okay. So when I say I am trying to gain a better performance for my application, what I am trying to ensure or what I am trying to enforce. So I am trying that whatever execution I am performing should always be on a particular database side as much as possible. So we are enforcing database side processing as much as possible. Okay. CDS, if you see, is nothing but a core data services. Okay. Now, when I say core data services, what is it? Okay. So if you understand, this term contains two parts. It is first of all providing us the data services. Okay. It means it is providing us the services which is helping us with the data that my UI applications will need. For an instance, let's just take it as example of Fiori Elements. So it means it provides the backend service for my applications. Okay, Fiori Element applications. or we can say any sort of UI applications to be more specific. Now, where actually it gets executed? It gets executed at the core of your data. Okay. So if I talk about any sort of your architecture of your system, okay, then your full application would be, we can say, having a MVP, right? It means it would be having an application server in middle. It would be having a database server, and it would be having a UI server as well. So this UI server would be requesting something to the application server, and the database server would be something that would be processing it. Now, if my database server is capable enough to process the request I am getting and provide as the furnished data, then why not directly make the particular database server's artifact responsible? And what is a database server artifact? That is CDS for now. Let's say, what all are database artifacts? That is something we would be learning anyway. It is nothing but CDS, we can say AMDP, and the new above syntaxes. Okay. Now, I am enforcing that whatever executions I am doing should happen always on the database side, taking that the application server would be enforced with the minimal amount of processing, and my UI would be getting the response it is looking for. That is why we would be going with the CDS. Now, what other things CDS contains? CDS contains a versatile library of, we can say, annotations. At the same time, we can say associations. Okay. How this is gonna help us? So let's say the CDS is containing very versatile library of annotation, then this annotation can be of different area. For example, let's say it can be a backend annotation saying, let's say, now it can belong to multiple namespaces. Let's say ABAP catalog, using which you can give multiple properties to ABAP catalog. You can control the access using access control. Okay. Let's say on my UI application, I am talking about that this is my purchase order dashboard, for an example. Okay. This is my PO dashboard. Now, my end user can be either a field person, or he can be a manager, or he can be a CEO or MD. Anyone can be the user of my application. Now, if it's a field person working on a particular plant which is belonging to a particular company code, then all I want is that this person should only be able to view the data he is entitled to view, or he is authorized to view. That is something we can achieve using access control. Now, but my Fiori application won't be looking this plain, right? What I need certain columns over here. I need certain filters over here. For some sort of important highlighting, I want certain we can say data highlighting, or in terms of let's say Fiori element, we can consider it as we should be able to provide multiple level of criticalities to the data. Okay, we should be able to provide a global search. Okay, this is currently I am talking about only in a view only dashboard. Of course, there are also list of annotation from, let's say, object model annotation as well, right? And this object model annotation would ultimately help you for any sort of manipulation of the data. Let's say if I want to create a record, update a record, delete a record, I also have a library for UI level annotations. I also have a library for, let's say, consumption level annotations. This is something which would be controlling your UI behavior. It means just by using your backend, or we can say CDS level annotation, we can control the Fiori app UI behavior, or we can say we can directly design my Fiori application using my annotation which I am writing on my backend side, the CDS level side. We can also have multiple chart level annotation which is also coming under part of your UI.chart. Okay, using which we can display different charts, we can display multiple visual filters and everything. But these all the things are possible using a set of annotation. It means my CDS is having very versatile library of an annotation which I'll be using, or which you can say which we would be using for the purpose of designing such application, and that too which are very performance optimal, because that is what is our main focus point over here. We might also have gone with something called gateway based OData service. Okay, for which we might need to write some certain sort of ABAP logic as well. And when I am writing ABAP logic, I might write it optimally or non-optimally, but what it all ends up into, if someone is not writing it in optimal manner, okay, using a new artifact, then it might slow down your application and your browser might result into timeout. Okay. That is why we would be learning onto something called CDS. Okay. So this is what we would be starting with. Now, when I talk about a Fiori applications architecture, or we can say any sort of architecture of an application which is based on a CDS, we are ultimately generating a service. Okay, we are ultimately generating a service which would be having a UI and a backend. Now, when I say a backend, it would be receiving a data in a format. Yep. Now we have everyone in. Okay, we would be ultimately generating a service which would be giving us each and every information in a form of an OData. Then how this OData is actually communicating to my UI? Using something called a REST API. Right? Like, so there is something called representational state transfer API that is ultimately helping out for the particular communication. So let's just quickly have something that is going to help us for the particular purpose. Okay, now let's just first understand the full architecture of REST API, because we know my CDS is having all this particular library, annotation, associations, the built-in functions are there, plenty of functionalities are there, which is going to help us for a better performance and Fiori application. But when I talk about Fiori application, we need a way with the help of which my UI would be communicating to my backend. That is something we can consider it as an REST API. So let's just quickly have a look at it. Okay. So when I say I'll be communicating to my UI, so let's say I have a UI system over here. I have my backend system over here. Okay. So this I can term as my UI system. This I can term as my backend system. For an example, let's consider it as it's nothing but my ERP system, which is working on a particular backend. Okay. Now this becomes my backend system. For an example, your UI system is sending a request, or we can say my user is clicking on a button saying, give me all the purchase orders. So what my UI guys, or we can say what my front-end application would be sending to me in the backend system, it would be sending me a request. Okay. So UI system would sending a request to my backend system. Now, my UI system can be anything. It can be a browser, or we can say a native mobile-based application as well, which understands a JSON or XML. Okay. So this is what my UI system understands, and what my backend system actually understands. My backend system is an ABAP-based system, let's say. So it only understands my ABAP language. So if my UI is sending me the request in a format which my backend system doesn't understand, then I will need certain mediator we should help this both the system communicate between with each other, and that is something we can consider it as a, let's say, a gateway hub. So what would be the role of my gateway hub system? This gateway hub system requires, or we can say this gateway hub system would accept the input. I can say it accept, I can segregate it more generically, like at time of request, it accepts, JSON or XML and convert it to my ABAP language, and ultimately my full ABAP architecture would be able to receive the request in the form of my ABAP terminology. It would be processing it. Let's say the system is saying, the UI guy is saying, give me all the purchase orders data which are belonging to a purchase order company code, let's say AA01. So this request would be over here in the form of what? Let's say URI. This URI would be converted into filter parameters, but in a ABAP manner. I can say it would be converted into ABAP filters by my gateway hub system, and this particular gateway hub system would pass it on to my ABAP language. ABAP would process it, and at time of response, it would accept my ABAP based data which I am sending as a part of, let's say, a pointers or a JSON, or we can say internal table, and it would convert it to JSON or XML, and then send it back to my UI system, where my UI system would be able to render the data and display it on the output system. Now, for this communication to happen, what would be my first step? First of all, let's say I want to ensure that what all components I'll need. So I'll just need a system which is giving us the data. So let's say for PO dashboard, if I take it as an example, then for PO dashboard, first I'll be generating a CDS view, which is giving me all the data from a purchase orders. Then I'll be exposing, or we can say I'll be generating the CDS view as OData service, and this particular generated OData service which is available over here, I need to make it visible to my UI system. Now my UI system doesn't know, okay, that whether there is any sort of backend system, or there are ultimately one backend system, or let's say 5 backend systems available. This may be my ERP system, this may be my, let's say, CRM system, this may be my SRM system, and each and every system is having their own set of applications which are running on the same UI. Okay, so for that, this generated OData service, we can say OData service needs to be registered on my gateway hub. Okay, using something called remote RFC connection to either of the backend system. So once the service has been registered, now it would be visible to my UI system via a particular service URL, whichever is configured using my, let's say, cloud connector or destinations, anything. And then this single UI system would be able to access whatever OData service which are getting exposed. Okay, so this time whatever response I am sending over here would ultimately reach to my browser, and my browser would be able to successfully display the data which I am sending as a part of a response. So this full communication architecture is happening in a manner of a generic approach called a, let's say, post put operation, we can say a get operation and a delete operation. So these four methods are ultimately helping us do any sort of possible actions we want to perform. And these are ultimately basic building blocks, or we can say possible action of a REST API. Okay. So why it is called REST API? Because it is ultimately representationally transferring the state. Your each of the earlier call won't be remembering what was the earlier call has been made. It means it is called a stateless API. Okay. So this is what it is ultimately built upon. It's a REST API, which is a stateless API. It is built upon. Now, the particular, maybe the last thing over here is the particular way with the help of which we can register the generated OData service. So we can say generating the CDS view as OData service. Now this particular OData service, whichever has been generated, can be registered to a gateway hub system. Now your backend system can be of multiple types. Okay. It means you can have in your system, you can have, you can have a separate backend and gateway system. Like I just discussed now, because in that case, all my UI system needs to remember is just my single gateway system which it would be communicating, and each CRM, SRM, ERP system would be registering their service over here. This is something we can call it as an hub-based deployment of your particular backend service, because it just needs to remember only one particular system to which your UI would be communicating to. So this is something we can consider it as a hub-based deployment. In a small scale project, like whenever we are in training, let's say if I talk about this particular scenario as well, here we would be having a single system which would be containing, we can say single system contains backend and gateway infra. So we would be directly creating the service and registering it in the gateway, we can say maintenance service, but it would be belonging to the same system. So for an ERP, there would be a dedicated gateway hub system. For an CRM, if there are any system, then there would be a dedicated gateway hub, we can say registry. Same way for SRM. But in that case, your UI needs to ensure to which system it is actually redirecting the call to. And this is something we can consider is a embedded deployment. Okay. Embedded deployment of your OData service. Reason being, the particular embedded architecture would be the one into which you would be having each and everything mapped in the same system. You would be having the same backend and the gateway system in the same box. This is something we can consider it as a gateway hub system deployed in a manner of an embedded deployment. Okay. So this is how we would be working with. So what we would be doing going forward is, we are planning to generate, let's say, a particular UI application. Now this UI application needs something. So we would be starting with something called a data. Okay. So when I want to generate a UI application, what does it need at all? First of all, it needs a data, because till the time your backend is not ready, your front end development, or we can say designing, won't be that thorough to start developing it. Okay. So in your UI application, first what we need is a data. So we would be starting with a service that would be exposing us a data in a different manner. Second thing, we would be making our service versatile with the list of we can say functionalities. Let's say our particular UI application can have a particular access control implemented. So it means it might be needing a DCL for access control plus DML, data manipulation. Let's say you want to create a record, update a record, delete a record. So these functionalities, these all the things can also be required. Third thing we would be needing over here is a UI behaviors. Let's say for certain sort of filtering, or we can say UI highlighting, or we can say designing, or we can say certain global search, or we can say the object-based designing, or we can say visual filter designing, or we can say certain charts development, the overview page development. What we need is a certain UI applications, UI annotations, list of a UI annotations that would be needing. So it becomes a part of your UI designing. So what we would be starting with is we would be first making our system up and running for the data, which would be providing us the data. This data, once we have, we would be implementing and enhancing it with this particular functionalities. Then we would be going with the UI designing, and this ultimately we will integrate with the actual application. So this is the step-by-step approach that we are planning to use over here now. So this is something which I can consider it as a full architecture which we would be using, or we can say which OData use for the communication with the UI. Okay. Are we all clear with the particular UI? We can say REST API architecture that we discussed till now.
Yes. So
one question, Sumit.
Yeah, please.
Like regarding this embedded based gateway and single system control and other, the method of creating OData is same, right?
Would always be the same. Exactly. So if you see, this is my ERP box, or we can say any sort of box. What I am doing is, or what I have to do is, I have always needs to create the OData service, which I'll be creating in the same manner. The way which is differing over here is where I am actually registering my service. So these are register. So this register can be a global one which everyone can view, or this register can be a local to a system which I am exposing. So let's say if it's dedicated to my ERP, then it's become embedded system. But if it's not dedicated, anyone from multiple systems can register their service over here. Then it becomes a hub-based deployment.
Okay. Even if you are calling from a UI system, there also there is no difference. It's just point to another system, right?
So in your UI, let's say you have a UI system over here, then you might be working with, let's say, a particular SAP BTP where you would be creating multiple destinations. Okay. So this destination is something which your UI application would be referring to. Okay. So it just point out to a particular destination and say, I want to use this service. This destination needs to be configured. But when I am configuring a destination, what all things I need to pass? I need to pass the, let's say, IP, or we can say system address of your destination system. So the system address that you would be passing over here, if you are passing it for the gateway hub system, then it would directly point over here, and it would be getting the list of service. Those are registered, and you can use it from there.
Okay. So in this case, it will be the same system, right? From the source and the yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is something on the particular architecture side. Now let's just get started with the way with the help of which we would be developing the particular application. So if I just connecting the system,